Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jake, and in this video we are wrapping up the Build a Portable Development Environment series. This is video number 5, so if you haven't watched the first 4, I suggest going back and watching those just to get some context. If this is the only video you watch, you might get inspired about setting up a portable development environment of your own, but we are going to execute the installation script that we've been maintaining over the last 4 videos. On GitHub, I manage all of my Dotfiles so that I can clone them on new computers whenever I need to set up a new environment. And inside of this repository, there is an install script. If I go into this install script, you can see that we're doing a few things like installing a package manager, using that package manager to install tools, stowing the configuration files for those tools, using a default shell, bundling plugins for that shell, etc. All of this is discussed in previous videos, so if you really wanted to learn, I highly suggest going back. Now, the goal of this video is to execute the installation script on a fresh machine, on a brand new Linux environment. I have that Linux environment in front of me here. I've wiped it, so we are basically starting from scratch. And the idea is that if you manage your configuration in the cloud with a tool like GitHub, and you have your install script there as well, then really you're just a git clone away from bootstrapping an entire environment that's repeatable and the same as your previous machine and previous machine and previous machine. So if you're interested in what is inside of this repository, I'll leave a link to it in the description, but I'm gonna go ahead and clone this repository onto my computer. And I'm going to use HTTPS. I'd prefer SSH, but because this is modeling a fresh installation, we have no SSH key set up. So I'm going to copy the repository URL, and I'm going to come back to my terminal, and I'm going to type git clone and paste in the URL. And when I click enter, we've cloned the repository. So now we have a new folder inside of our home directory. Remember, we are in our home directory here. So I will now go into that .files folder, and what we have is essentially what we have in GitHub, right? Including this install script. So step 1, clone the repository. Step 2, run the script. You need elevated permissions to run an executable in this environment. So if you try to run the install script using the syntax here and you get permissions denied, it's totally fine. Just run chmod plus x and then the name of the script that you want to execute. So I will clear this out and I'm going to run that install script. And as it executes, things are happening in sequence, right? Okay, let me give my system password. First thing we're going to do is install that package manager. We're using Nix, which is a cross-platform package manager. Then it's going to go ahead and install all of the packages that we explicitly want to install. Okay, and then the installation is finished. So what we've done, we installed Nix package manager, we installed a bunch of packages, we made ZSH our default shell, we put all of our configuration in the proper location on our machine, and we can confirm that by going back to the home directory and listing it out. And now our home directory has, it's a little bit more robust, right? We have some ZSH stuff, we have some tmux stuff, we have git stuff, we have a new config directory. All of this was done in our installation script, and it gives us access to packages like git, for instance, or stow or FZF. All of these packages are made available to us. However, one of the things we did inside of that script was change our default shell to ZSH. And if I echo my shell right now, I'm still in bash. And the reason for this is because that default login shell doesn't take hold until you start a new terminal session. So if I want to be inside of ZSH and not bash, then after I run the install script, I need to start a new terminal. So I'm going to open a new window. And as I do, you notice that a few things are happening right off the bat. We were installing NVM. Now we're in this configuration wizard. And I'm going to go through this wizard real quick. Yes, up here, left, no, 2 lines, sparse, no, rows. Okay, so what just happened? First of all, ignore this. This is not that important. What ended up happening was we started a new terminal session. The terminal started in ZSH, which is our default shell because of the install script. and it looked for a ZSH configuration file. And we have one called ZSHRC. And so when the ZSHRC file is found and it's processed, it is setting up the ZSH shell for the first time. So it's kind of installing all the plugins that we've listed. And one of those plugins was a power level 10K prompt. So that's why we have this new prompt here. And that happens the first time, and then you're all good to go. It would be nice if we could automate the process of running the install script and then opening a new terminal. There might be a way to do that. I'm just not, I don't know. If you do, let me know in the comments, but it's fine for us to run the install script and then open up a new window. That's not that big of a deal. Now that we're in ZSH, we are missing one crucial element to this entire environment, and that is access to all of the packages we installed with Nix. So if I want to open up my ZSHRC file using Neovim, and I type in Vim, remember, if you go look at the ZSHRC file, you'll notice that we are aliasing Vim to Neovim. So when I type Vim, what I'm really typing is Neovim. So if I type Vim, the text is in red, which is also already not a good sign. And then when I try to open the file, it says command nvim not found. But that's strange because we definitely installed it, right? If I go to my install script, you can see that we've installed Neovim. Now the reason for this was discussed in a previous video, but essentially when you run the install script and you install Nix for the first time, whatever shell you're in, Nix will place a one-line piece of code into the relevant dot file so that the shell has access to all of the packages that you installed. When we installed Nix using the installation script, we were in Bash. We are now in ZSH. ZSH doesn't know Nix exists. So we have to find that one-line command and move it to our ZSH file. That command was placed in a dot profile. So I'm going to use this \vim command to gain access to the unaliased vim command. And I'm going to go into that profile. I'm going to go to the bottom. And you can see right here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see it. There is an if statement. And at the end of the if statement is a comment that says added by Nix installer. And it's checking to see if a file exists, and then it runs it. So we want to take this out of our dot profile, and we want to move it to our ZSHRC. So I'll go all the way down here. I'll say Nix. I'll remove this here. And instead of using home Jake as the path to the home directory, I'm just going to use a tilde, because in the future, my home directory may not be home Jake. So I will make those changes. I will save that. So I saved my ZSHRC file, and just to confirm, I still don't have access to that nvim command. But if I go ahead and I source it, and forget about that error, this is a work tool that I need to clear out. If I try to vim ZSHRC again, now you'll notice that instead of a red command, it's green. And I can actually look at the version of nvim. So now we know, okay, we definitely have access to the command. And I want to do this in perpetuity and never have to do this again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my .files directory, git status, and I want to say git add git commit -m update.zshrc, or let's put a better commit message. Let's say add Nix to ZSHRC. Cool. Now all we have to do is push this change up to GitHub, and our .files have been updated. And this is really the beauty of managing your .files in the cloud. Anytime you make a change, you just push it because you're version controlled. Anytime in the future that you go ahead and set up a new machine, you're never going to have to worry about this step again. So I'm going to run git push, and I'm going to type in my username, Jake Weiss, and the password is going to have to be a personal access token. This is how GitHub works. This is a slight aside to the video. Ideally, you're using an SSH key. Because I installed the Dotfiles directory using HTTPS, I have to go through this song and dance. So I am going to generate a personal access token so that I can make this change. Great, so I generated the access token, I inputted it here, and I am now allowed to push changes to my main branch inside of GitHub. So I can log out the changes, and you can see here that I've made an adjustment. So now if I go back to my Dotfiles directory, you can see I have a new commit message here, add nix to ZSHRC. So we'll go to ZSHRC, travel all the way to the bottom, and boom, we have our little one-liner. So that little hiccup we had will never occur again. So now that we have access to all of the packages installed with Nix, let's go ahead and use one of them. Of course, Neovim, right? We know we have Neovim installed, and we know that we have it aliased to the vim command. So let's open up our ZSHRC. And as soon as we do that, we're gonna get an error like this. This error is happening because we have a bunch of Neovim related plugins that we've defined, but we haven't actually installed them. And that's why our configuration, like our syntax highlighting is not there. We have a weird color scheme. So I'm gonna go into my Dotfiles directory, and I'm gonna find that Neovim init.vim file. Got to drill down a little bit here. And I'm gonna go into init.vim. Again, every time I trigger that Neovim command, I get this error, and we want to know why. So if I scroll down a little bit here, you can see I have a ton of plugins. And even though I've explicitly said, hey, I want to use these plugins, I actually haven't defined them at all. And if you go back to the Neovim video, you'll notice we're using Vim plug to manage all these plugins. And there's a couple steps involved in actually installing them. First you have to say, hey, I want to use the plugin, and then you have to use a special command called plug install. So now that I run this command, we installed all the plugins. So now that I've installed all those plugins, I can reopen init.vim, and everything is what we'd expect it to be. We have our syntax highlighting, we got our numbers working, we have a status line, anything that we've explicitly defined here. And all our plugins are installed too. This is another opportunity for optimization. If you have a Neovim configuration like me, maybe instead of manually installing all those plugins, there's a way to do it from the command line. And I did a little bit of reading, and it looks like there's an issue inside of the Vim plug repository about running the plug install command from the command line. There is a comment here, it's about a year old, that says Neovim has a command called headless that you can use to run plug install. This is interesting. So if I take this and I go to my install.sh file, I'm gonna go to the bottom and I'm gonna write install Neovim plugins. And I'm gonna paste that command. Again, we've made a change to a version controlled file. So I'm going to commit it. I'm gonna say install nvim plugins upon global installation. Oh, we gotta do this again, huh? Side note, this is starting to get annoying, and I've only done it twice now. So I definitely wanna figure out how to get SSH keys set up as soon as possible. But that being said, we've changed up our install script a little bit, and we pushed that change to GitHub. So if I go back to GitHub and I look at the install script, we are installing Neovim plugins here. So theoretically, we won't have to manually run plug install. This will actually just happen automatically. The only way to test this is to wipe my environment again and run and do this entire process over. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so we're back with a fresh installation of Ubuntu. If I list out my home directory, nothing there. So let's go ahead and utilize some of these changes in our .files repository and see how they do. Now, remember, we are testing out in our install script if we are capable of installing Neovim in headless mode, or should I say we're installing Neovim plugins in headless mode. So I'm going to clone this using HTTPS. So git clone, and then we're going to cd into .files, and we want to run that install script. Okay, so everything finished. Interestingly enough, we do have an error here, which is the same error we ran into previously when we tried to open Neovim for the first time. Now, I assume what's happening is by running that nvim command in headless mode, we're still actually interfacing with Neovim, and it's looking for a plugin that doesn't actually exist. If we are still if this was still successful, and we're about to find out right now, then the adjustment we would probably want to make to avoid something like this is to kind of check to see if these plugins are installed before actually using them. Now we are still inside of Bash, so I'm going to open up a new window. This is going to do a bunch of ZSH things. Install nvim. It'll probably give me my power level 10K prompt, so let's just go through that. And remember, we also updated our ZSHRC file to include that nix script, so I should have access to Neovim, right? And if I open up ZSHRC, things do look good, right? I didn't get any issues with opening up the file itself. I also have an alias to open up my vimrc. So it did work, though it wasn't the greatest experience because we got those errors. That would be an improvement that we can make, and I'm going to take a mental note of that. But you know, ideally what we'd probably want to do, the error actually happens here. We'd want to do something like if plugin exists, source it. If not, don't source it. And I'm sure there's a way to do this. We'll have to revisit for another time. The last thing I want to do is update this README file because it's clearly not relevant to some of the changes we've made. So I'm going to cd into .files. I'm going to open up the README. And I'll just delete all of this and kind of write out a way to like an instructions on how to do this in the future. So we want to clone this repository, run install.sh, open up new window to initiate ZSH shell. We can write a current issues. Installing nvim plugins in headless causes error output, but doesn't break installation. All right, I'm going to commit this to the repository. And now we have the updated README in GitHub. So that about does it for this video. There's obviously a lot of improvements that we can make in the future. The good thing is we can build on these improvements because we are now hosting our .files within GitHub. And as long as we keep track of everything, we keep track of changes and we keep track of issues, then over time, this configuration should work really well for you. I hope you learned something from this series. It was a lot of fun to make and really beneficial for me. So I hope that it was beneficial for you as well. If you have any suggestions for the development environment setup, or maybe just want to ask some questions, feel free to leave comments below. I'm going to make sure to leave a bunch of links to the relevant web pages and the Notion template in the description. But yeah, it's been fun. And, take this series of videos, digest it, and maybe you will come up with a better solution, or you can take pieces that you like from what I have currently and make it your own, right? So we will see you on the next one. See ya.